It wasn't a crash, it wasn't a design flaw, it wasn't even a lack of money. In March 2026, a Russian test pilot took an aircraft called the MC-21 into the sky for barely over an hour, reaching just 580 kilometers an hour at 3,000 meters, numbers that sound almost unremarkable for a modern airliner. Except this flight had been 11 years in the making, and the reason it took that long has nothing to do with engineering difficulty and everything to do with a single phone call nobody in Moscow could stop. That call came from Washington in 2022, and in the days after it, Russia's most ambitious aircraft program in a generation was quietly and permanently cut in half. The aircraft in question is the Yakovlev MC-21, Russia's direct answer to the Airbus A320 and the Boeing 737, the two jets that between them fly the overwhelming majority of passengers on Earth. On paper, the MC-21 was supposed to beat them both. A wider cabin at 2.24 meters across compared to the A320's 2.11 meters, engineered specifically to give passengers more shoulder room and airlines more revenue per row, a clean sheet composite wing, a production target that would have made it Russia's first real narrow-body rival to Western aviation in decades. Here's the part most coverage skips entirely. The MC-21 was never actually designed to fly on a Russian engine. It was designed around the Pratt Whitney PW1400G, an American-built turbofan, the same engine family trusted by airlines across the world. Russian engineers had every intention of buying it, and for years they did. Then the invasion of Ukraine happened, sanctions followed, and Pratt & Whitney simply stopped shipping engines to Russia. Not slowed down, stopped. In plain language, the aircraft Russia had spent a decade designing suddenly had no engine to put under its wings. This is where most people assume the story ends. It doesn't. It's where the real story starts. Russia's aviation regulator, Rosaviatsia, made a decision that revealed exactly how serious the situation was. It declared that the original version of the MC-21, the one built for the Pratt & Whitney engine, would never enter passenger service. Not delayed, not paused, dead. In its place, a new variant would become the only version anyone would ever fly, the MC-21-310, powered entirely by a Russian-built engine called the PD-14. If you're new here, this channel breaks down exactly this kind of story where a country's engineering ambitions collide with the geopolitics nobody sees coming. Hit subscribe if that's the kind of thing you come to YouTube for, because there's a lot more of it coming. So what actually is the PD-14? It's built by Aviation, a Russian engine maker based in Perm, and it matters more than its name suggests. This is the first fully Russian-designed turbofan built since the 1980s. Not an upgrade of a Soviet-era design, not a licensed copy. An entirely domestic engine developed from the ground up specifically to prove that Russia's aviation industry could survive without the West. But building an engine and building a trusted engine are two very different problems, and that's where the real tension in this story lives. Problem 1, the performance gap. Aviatel's own published figures put the PD-14 roughly on par with the CFM LEAP, the engine family used on the A320neo. That's a genuinely competitive claim. But against the Pratt & Whitney engine, it was actually built to replace. The PD-14 sits about 5% behind in fuel economy. On a single flight, that number is invisible. Across a fleet flying thousands of routes a year for 2 decades, it becomes the difference between an airline turning a profit and an airline bleeding money. In short, the PD-14 doesn't need to be equal to survive. It needs to be good enough that Russian carriers have no other choice, and right now they don't. Problem 2, it isn't just the engine. The MC-21 310 isn't simply an MC-21 with a different engine bolted on. Yakovlev has had to replace the avionics, the auxiliary power unit, the air conditioning systems, and dozens of smaller components that used to come from Western suppliers. The aircraft is now built from more than 80% domestically produced parts. That sounds like a triumph of self-sufficiency. It also means every one of those systems has to be tested, certified, and proven reliable, essentially from scratch, with none of the decades of accumulated flight data that Western suppliers already have. In plain language, Russia isn't just replacing an engine, it's rebuilding an entire aircraft's nervous system. At the same time, it's trying to get that aircraft into the air. Problem 3. The calendar keeps moving. Serial production of the MC-21 has been delayed multiple times, and the current target, the second half of 2026, is already the aircraft's third or fourth final deadline. First commercial delivery has now slipped to 2027, 5 years after the original Pratt and Whitney powered version was supposed to be flying paying passengers. Here's the part that should genuinely worry Yakovlev. Every year this program slips is another year that Airbus and Boeing keep flying, keep refining their own engines, and keep extending the exact gap Russia is trying to close. And yet dismissing this program outright would be a mistake, because Yakovlev has already demonstrated something Western observers doubted was possible. During recent testing, engineers deliberately simulated the failure of one PD-14 engine mid-takeoff to confirm the aircraft could still safely continue and climb. That is not a cosmetic milestone. That is the kind of real-world stress test regulators actually look for before they will certify an aircraft to carry passengers. The engineering, slowly and expensively, is getting proven out. So here's the question worth sitting with. Is this actually about one airplane? It isn't. The same playbook is already running on a second aircraft. Russia's SJ-100 regional jet, previously known as the Superjet 100, used a French-Russian engine called the SA-M146. That partnership is being unwound too, replaced by a new domestic engine called the PD-8, built by the same import substitution logic as the PD-14. In short, the MC-21 isn't an isolated engineering project. It's the flagship of a much larger national strategy to remove Western dependency from Russian aviation entirely, one aircraft type at a time. That's the real story: sanctions forced into existence. Not a single plane failing to take off, but an entire industry being rebuilt from the inside under a deadline nobody in Moscow chose and nobody can extend. The PD-14 might close the gap. It might not. But either way, Russia has already made the one decision that can't be undone. There is no version of this program anymore that goes back to relying on the West. Whether that bet pays off depends on whether an engine can go from "it flew for an hour" to millions of passengers trust it completely. And in aviation, that distance is never measured in ambition. It's measured in hours. Nobody has logged yet. If you want to see where this goes next, the certification fight, the delivery delays, whether Russian carriers actually get their planes in 2027, subscribe, because this story is far from finished.